an age where information, entertainment, and social connection are available at the touch of a button, we paradoxically find ourselves more unmotivated and disconnected than ever. Every spare moment can be filled with a notification or a new piece of content. Yet a growing apathy pervades our lives. This widespread demotivation is often dismissed as laziness or lack of willpower, but such explanations overlook a deeper reality. The problem is not a lack of motivation. It's the excess of stimulation that suffocates our ability to connect with ourselves and find genuine meaning. We have endless fun at our fingertips, but data show that people are becoming less happy and more depressed over the last decades. In short, we are surrounded by stimulation yet starved for satisfaction. Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, offers a profound lens to understand this crisis. Frankl endured the worst horrors of humanity and observed that those who survived psychologically weren't necessarily the strongest or the smartest. They were those who found meaning even amid suffering. In his view, human beings are primarily driven by a will to meaning, not by Freud's will to pleasure or Adler's will to power. It is the need for significance and purpose that keeps us alive. If motivation is born from meaning, we must ask, what happens when an entire society is conditioned to seek only pleasure and distraction? What becomes of our psyche when every moment of boredom is filled with a video, every silence drowned out by external noise? Frankl's insight, that meaning, even more than comfort, fuels human resilience, casts a stark light on our current predicament. Perhaps our sense of aimlessness today isn't a moral weakness at all. Perhaps you are not lazy or broken. You are simply exhausted. Exhausted from chasing goals that aren't truly yours, consuming content that adds no value, and living in constant distraction. In this view, modern demotivation is not a personal failure but a symptom, a warning that something essential has been lost amid all the noise. Hyperstimulation, the silent saboteur of motivation. The brain's evolutionary mismatch. The human mind evolved over millennia to thrive in cycles of activity and rest, focus and reflection. But in the last few decades, our environment has changed drastically. We have entered an era of hyperstimulation, where our brains are bombarded by a relentless stream of inputs that we were never designed to handle continuously. Every idle moment that once might have invited daydreaming or introspection is now immediately filled by a ping or a swipe. What was once downtime, those moments to simply be, is now seen as wasted time to be optimized or at least filled with some form of digital distraction. Technology, for all its benefits, often acts less as an ally of consciousness and more as an anesthetic for the soul. We find ourselves reflexively scrolling through endless feeds not out of true interest, but because we've grown unable to sit with our own thoughts. We binge-watch videos or refresh apps not to learn or grow, but to avoid the discomfort of boredom or solitude. This constant escape from ourselves has profound consequences for our brain chemistry and motivation. Neuroscientists note that dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation, is being artificially overstimulated by our digital habits. Each notification, like, or amusing clip offers a tiny jolt of novelty, a shallow dopamine hit that keeps us hooked in a cycle of seeking the next distraction. Over time, our brain's reward circuitry adapts. It becomes desensitized. Studies confirm that when dopamine is continuously triggered by easy, instant gratification, like social media or online entertainment, the brain's reward process breaks down. We get flooded with cheap rewards that trick us into feeling accomplished, even though nothing meaningful has been achieved. Each dopamine spike makes the real world a little dimmer by comparison. Activities that once brought joy, a conversation, a walk outside, a creative hobby, now struggle to hold our attention or feel boring next to the hyperpalatable stimuli on our screens. In effect, easy pleasure is killing real motivation. Psychologists observe that when every free moment is filled with a quick reward, We lose the ability to desire deeply or pursue long-term goals. Our natural drive for exploration and accomplishment is hijacked. Why work toward a challenging goal or endure momentary discomfort when a flood of entertainment and social feedback is always a tap away? Indeed, leadership coaches note that chronic overstimulation leads to reduced drive, lower energy, and dulled ambition, exactly the qualities we need for motivation and growth. In an overstimulated mind, the appetite for real achievement is blunted because we're constantly sated with digital sugar. The erosion of inner life. There's an even more unsettling aspect to this. By constantly fleeing boredom, we also flee the important questions that tend to arise in quiet moments. It is often in silence, in the pauses of life, that we confront the state of our lives and what we truly care about. When those pauses vanish, so do our opportunities for self-discovery. As Frankl warned, modern people have less time to reflect, less courage to make decisions, and less freedom to find their own meaning. We drown out the very signals from within that could guide us to a more fulfilling path. Psychiatrist Anna Lemke has observed this phenomenon clinically. She notes that today, every spare second is an opportunity to be stimulated, whether by entering the TikTok vortex, scrolling Instagram, swiping on dating apps, or binging on streaming content. We have, as she puts it, forgotten how to be alone with our thoughts. And although one might expect all this instant pleasure to make us happier, the opposite is true. Rates of depression and dissatisfaction are climbing in the age of hyperstimulation. Our attention spans have shortened, and many of us feel anxious without constant input. By filling every quiet moment with some form of entertainment, we inadvertently rob ourselves of the space where inspiration, creativity, and meaning are born. Neuroscience supports this. When we allow the mind to rest, the brain's default mode network activates, integrating our experiences and fostering creativity. But if we never allow that space, if we reach for the phone the second we're free, we interrupt the brain's natural processing. We might avoid a bit of boredom, but we also impede the deeper synchronization of thought that produces insight and original ideas. In short, constant stimulation fragments the mind. The fragmented mind, consequences of psychic exhaustion, from reflection to reaction. What happens to a mind that never gets to rest or reflect? A mind perpetually darting from one stimulus to the next? The answer is simple but devastating. It fragments. An overloaded mind does not truly think, it merely reacts. Instead of contemplation, there is consumption. Instead of intentional response, there is impulsive reflex. Over time, such a mind loses its most precious faculty, the ability to reflect deeply and independently. Reflection is more than just having thoughts. It is the act of stepping back and observing one's thoughts and feelings, allowing them to settle and form a coherent picture. It's in this internal silent space that we discern patterns, learn from experience, and decide what truly matters to us. It's how we form an identity and a set of values. But when every moment is filled with new stimuli, that reflective space is eroded. In its place emerges a frantic, anxious consciousness, flitting from one thing to another without continuity. We become, in effect, strangers to ourselves, carried along by a current of impulses and external suggestions. The tired mind in a hyperstimulated state begins to seek only one thing: relief, not purpose, not understanding, just a momentary escape from the barrage. As a result, we can become dependent on whatever provides that quick comfort, whether it's scrolling social media, eating something, playing a game, or even working obsessively, toxic productivity, to drown out an inner void. This is the trap of shallow relief. Excessive stimulation prevents us from thinking deeply, and without deep thought we end up trapped in the same unfulfilling loops. We wake up, check feeds, work superficially, seek quick distractions whenever challenged, and repeat, never breaking free to chart a new course. Alienation from self. One of the most troubling outcomes of this cycle is a growing alienation from our own self. Without moments of pause or introspection, we lose touch with our true emotions and desires. We may no longer recognize what we really want versus what we've been conditioned to want. Instead of our actions arising from inner values or authentic goals, we find ourselves living at the mercy of external inputs. What the algorithm recommends, what our peers suggest, what advertising and societal pressures tell us to strive for. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard warned that the deepest form of despair is to choose to be another than oneself. In other words, the greatest tragedy is to live life not as your true self. But how can we be ourselves if we never give ourselves time to find ourselves? If from the moment we wake until we fall asleep we are inundated with others' voices, images, and expectations, when do we hear our own voice? In this state of alienation, it's no wonder that motivation collapses. Genuine motivation, the kind that energizes us from within, is a byproduct of being connected to our inner self, to what we truly care about. But that inner connection requires silence and space to develop. Viktor Frankl wisely noted, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. If we eliminate that space, if life becomes a constant barrage of stimulus response with no pause, we effectively lose our freedom to choose. We become reactive beings, living on autopilot. Our actions might continue, but our motivation, our reason why we act, becomes faint and lost. When there is no gap between stimulus and response, we operate by habit and impulse alone. Life may be filled with activity, but it lacks meaning. This is the essence of what's happening in our hyperstimulated era. We are busy reacting, clicking, and consuming, but we often don't know why we're doing any of it. And that leads to a pervasive sense of aimlessness, or what Frankl called the existential vacuum, a feeling of emptiness and lack of purpose that haunts modern society. Demotivation as a symptom, not a defect. The muffled cry of the soul. In a culture obsessed with productivity and hustle, feeling unmotivated is stigmatized. We're told to hack our habits, grind harder, no excuses. Demotivation is viewed as a personal failing. But what if chronic apathy is not a sign that you're broken? What if it's actually a sane response to a broken way of life? Consider that your persistent lack of drive might be a form of quiet protest, the muffled cry of a soul overwhelmed by superficial rewards and empty goals. From this perspective, demotivation is not weakness. It's a message. It's the psyche saying, I can't keep chasing these meaningless things. When one's days are filled with activities that don't resonate deeply, eventually the spirit says, no more. You might experience this as that feeling of being stuck or drained, like you can't push yourself to do the things you're supposed to do. It may very well be that you are tired of acting without purpose. It's not that you inherently lack discipline or strength. It's that your energy has been sapped by trying to force yourself to care about things that don't truly matter to you. The modern world often sets us on autopilot toward external markers of success, chasing grades, money, likes, accolades, without pausing to consider if these pursuits nourish our inner values. Many of us have been running for so long that when we finally feel exhausted and unmotivated, we assume something is wrong with us. In truth, this exhaustion can be our inner self demanding a timeout, urging us to stop living life on someone else's terms. As one writer put it, we're trying to rekindle a flame using false fuel. The fuel might be promises of status or pleasure or duty, but if those don't align with our authentic self, the flame of motivation burns low. Imagine a plant that has been potted in poor soil and kept under artificial light 24/7. It might grow, but it will be pale and weak because it's disconnected from the conditions it naturally needs. Similarly, a mind immersed in constant stimulation and external pressure, without time to put down roots in its own being, becomes weak and listless. Demotivation in such a case is like the plant's wilted leaves. a clear signal that its environment is not conducive to life. It is the body and soul's way of saying, we need to stop. We need to go home. Distraction versus fulfillment. Viktor Frankl observed something very important about modern life. When a person cannot find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. We see this all around us, people compulsively chasing the next shopping purchase, the next binge-worthy series, the next social media high, in a desperate attempt to fill an inner void. But distraction is not fulfillment. Those quick fixes can temporarily cover up the emptiness, but inevitably, the emptiness returns, and each time it may feel a bit heavier. When the numbness of distraction wears off, we are confronted with the same truth. The real problem was never just that we weren't active enough. The problem was that we lacked direction and meaning. Trying to solve an existential crisis with sheer activity is like trying to cure dehydration with salt water. You only intensify the thirst. Thus, pouring more effort into being productive or forcing motivation will not work if we're aiming at the wrong things. What we need is not more activity, but reconnection. Reconnection with ourselves, with what we truly value, and with sources of meaning beyond the noise of daily busyness. Recognizing demotivation as a symptom of disconnection rather than a defect can be liberating. It shifts the question from "what's wrong with me?" to "what is my lack of motivation telling me about my life right now?" Perhaps it's telling you that the goals you've been pursuing are not your goals, that the life you're living does not reflect your true values or passions. This realization can be the first step to realigning your path. Frankl noted that in the absence of meaning, people attempt to fill the void with pleasure, but meaning can only come from engaging with life in a personally significant way. No amount of comfort or entertainment can substitute for purpose. This is why achieving a state of endless leisure and ease, the modern dream of lay on a beach forever, often backfires. Without something meaningful to do, human beings languish. We are wired not just to consume, but to create, to serve, to understand, to matter in some way. So if you feel demotivated, consider that your soul might be yearning for something more real. The answer to demotivation will not be found in a new productivity hack or a double shot of espresso. It will be found by listening to that inner voice that is tired of the superficial and longs for the significant. Viktor Frankl's lesson, the will to meaning, a purpose in the pain. Viktor Frankl's life and work illuminate the antidote to our modern malaise. As a prisoner in Auschwitz and other concentration camps, Frankl witnessed suffering on an unfathomable scale: hunger, disease, brutality, the loss of everyone and everything he loved. In those harrowing conditions, he made a crucial observation. Those who could find meaning in their suffering were far more likely to survive and maintain their dignity. Some prisoners would comfort others, cling to the vision of a loved one waiting for them, or imagine a task they still needed to accomplish. Others succumbed to despair and apathy. Frankl distilled this insight in a line he often quoted from Nietzsche: "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." In other words, if you have a reason, a purpose, you can endure great difficulties. Without a reason, even comfort and ease can feel unbearable. Frankl called this central motivating force the will to meaning. In contrast to Freud's idea that we seek pleasure or Adler's idea that we seek power, Frankl argued that our deepest drive is to find meaning in our lives. He founded Logotherapy, from logos, meaning meaning in Greek, to help people unlock this drive. According to Logotherapy's principles, human life has meaning under all circumstances, even the worst suffering, and it is our task to find that meaning uniquely for ourselves. One of Frankl's most remarkable claims is that meaning can be found even in suffering. This doesn't mean we enjoy suffering or seek it out, but it means that when suffering is unavoidable, we can choose how to hold it. We can, for instance, see it as an opportunity to demonstrate courage, to deepen our empathy, or to fight for something. Frankl observed prisoners who, in the midst of horror, chose to comfort others or refused to let cruelty turn them cruel. They found meaning in how they suffered, and this inner decision gave them a kind of dignity that the Nazis could not strip away. Life never ceases to have meaning, even in the face of unavoidable suffering, Frankl wrote. This perspective turns the modern notion of motivation on its head. We often think we need to feel good or be in ideal conditions to be motivated. Frankl discovered that often it's the other way around. When we act for the sake of meaningful goals, the strength and motivation follow. Purpose is not a luxury for when we're comfortable, it's a lifeline for when we're not. Asking the essential questions. If lack of motivation today is really a lack of meaning, then the solution is to reconnect with meaning. Frankl invites each of us to ask, what am I living for? This is a much more uncomfortable question than, how can I be more productive? Or, how can I get motivated? It requires soul-searching. It requires breaking away from what everyone else says you should want and identifying what truly matters to you. As Frankl insisted, no one can answer this question for you. Each of us has a unique mission in life that only we can fulfill. Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life. Therein he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated, Frankl wrote. Thus, everyone's task is as unique as his specific opportunity to implement it. In other words, your life is irreplaceable, and so is the meaning that you alone can create from it. The absence of motivation is a signal that one's why is missing or obscured. The way back is to seek that why. It doesn't have to be a grand, earth-shattering purpose. It can be devotion to your family, a creative project, a cause in your community, or a personal principle you live by. What matters is that it's authentic, something that comes from within and that connects you to life in a way that feels significant. Even caring for one person can be a profound why. As Frankl observed, love for someone can literally keep a person alive in the worst circumstances. Frankl himself survived the camps partly by imagining himself giving lectures after the war about the psychology of the concentration camp. He derived meaning from the idea that his suffering could be turned into knowledge to help others. That meaning kept his spirit alive. In our far more ordinary context, we can still apply this wisdom. Consider your most demotivated days. Often, it's not physical tiredness that weighs you down, but a sense of pointlessness. Conversely, think of times you were excited about a project. You might have worked long hours but felt energized, not drained. The difference is meaning. When you have a why, you can endure the challenges, the how, with resilience. Thus, the key to overcoming demotivation is to rediscover your why. This might require making changes, big or small, to align your life with it. It might mean changing jobs, or it might just mean changing your approach to your current job, finding aspects of it that connect to your values. It might mean cutting back on certain distractions or commitments that don't serve your purpose, to make space for those that do. Yet finding meaning is not something that usually happens while we're rushing around or inundated with input. It often requires us to step back, reflect, and listen to ourselves. This is where the oft-avoided trio comes in: silence, pause, and even discomfort. The power of silence and solitude. Silence as an invitation. In a world that views constant busyness as a badge of honor, silence and stillness can feel uncomfortable, even threatening. Many people today go so far as to avoid silence at all costs, plugging in music, podcasts, or TV as background noise, mindlessly scrolling during any lull. There's a revealing study in which participants were asked to sit alone with no stimulation for 15 minutes. A large number preferred to give themselves mild electric shocks rather than endure their own quiet company. It's as if being alone with our thoughts has become a lost art. But this fear of silence is precisely what we must overcome to reclaim our motivation and purpose. Silence is not empty. Silence is an invitation. When we remove the constant noise, We create a space in which we can finally hear the subtler whispers of our mind and heart. Yes, at first what we hear might be uncomfortable, anxious thoughts, unresolved feelings, the very things we've been trying to drown out. That is normal. In fact, that's a good sign that you're beginning to confront what's real. Silence confronts us, as one observer noted, forcing us to face the chaotic thoughts and feelings we've avoided. But only by facing them can we begin to understand and move through them. In the silence, once the initial discomfort settles, the essential can emerge. You might rediscover dreams you shelved away, or recognize that a relationship or job is draining you, or feel pulled toward an activity you truly miss. These signals are easy to miss when your days are filled with noise, but in quiet, the truth has room to surface. As the saying goes, often attributed to Frankl or Covey, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. Silence is that space made larger. It's where you regain the freedom to choose your direction, rather than be driven by the momentum of stimuli, relearning to listen. Regaining motivation and meaning in life is not solely an intellectual exercise, it's also a listening exercise. Life is constantly asking us questions. What fulfills you? What do you value? What kind of person do you want to be? But we can't hear, let alone answer those questions if we never listen for them. In our saturated world, genuine listening, especially to oneself, has become rare. We hear the loud voices of society telling us what we should want or do, but our own inner voice is drowned out. Frankl suggested that life has a way of questioning each of us, and our job is to respond with our answers through the way we live. To discern those answers, we must pay attention to the quiet stirrings inside, our conscience, our intuition, our feelings. Creating regular practices of silence can help. Perhaps it's morning journaling, or an evening walk without your phone, or simply sitting in meditation or prayer. At first, these can feel unproductive. Nothing's happening. But in truth, a lot is happening beneath the surface. You are giving your psyche room to breathe and speak. It's important to note that silence and solitude can be challenging if you're not used to them. When you first disconnect, you might feel anxious or fidgety, a kind of detox effect from constant stimulation. Psychologist Anna Lemke calls this the discomfort of tolerating the come down. But she also notes that if we persevere through this discomfort, we often experience a sense of clarity and real freedom on the other side. The brain begins to reset its reward pathways. Our capacity for focus and deep thought improves when we're not constantly interrupting ourselves. Just as the body needs rest after overstimulation, the mind needs quiet to recalibrate. Discomfort as a gateway to meaning. Modern culture teaches us to avoid discomfort, but some forms of discomfort are actually signals of growth. The awkwardness of sitting in silence, the unease of being temporarily out of the loop. These are signs that you are stepping out of the addictive comfort zone of endless distraction. It is in this zone of mild discomfort that real change happens. When you resist the urge to always stimulate yourself, you start to realize you can survive without it, and more importantly, that you can start addressing the thoughts and feelings that come up. Consider the process akin to physical exercise. The strain in your muscles during a workout isn't a sign to immediately stop. It's a sign that you're getting stronger. Similarly, the mental strain of boredom or restlessness when you cut back on easy dopamine hits is a sign your mind is strengthening its capacity for patience and introspection. Over time, what was uncomfortable can even become highly rewarding. Many people report that after an initial period of tech detox or reduced stimulation, they regain a childlike appreciation for simple pleasures. Reading a book becomes easier. Nature seems more vivid, conversations more engaging. This is the re-sensitization of the reward system that was numbed, and along with it often comes a resurgence of motivation to pursue more meaningful activities. Crucially, in silence, you may rediscover your values and authentic desires that got buried. You might remember how much you actually loved creating art or helping others or studying nature before life got so noisy. These gentle inner prompts are like a compass pointing you back to what truly moves you. Frankl wrote, "Each of us has to find in his own life a unique meaning. No life can be replaced. No destiny can be repeated. Each one is irreplaceable." Such insight can only dawn when we stop comparing ourselves to others and listen to what our irreplaceable self is saying. In summary, silence and solitude are not empty voids to run from, but fertile ground for self-reconnection. They are the antidote to the fragmentation and alienation discussed earlier. They give you back to yourself. From pause to purposeful action, the moment of rupture. Often, change begins with a breaking point. There comes a moment when living on autopilot is no longer sustainable, a moment when the emptiness speaks louder than the distractions. Perhaps you've experienced this. You finish a marathon session of some game or show and suddenly feel a wave of sadness or hollowness. Or you wake up one morning and the thought of going through your usual routine feels unbearable. This is the moment of rupture. It's painful, but it's also an opening, a chance to finally pivot instead of spinning in place. When you reach this kind of inflection point, don't panic. Realize that noticing your unhappiness or demotivation is actually a sign of awakening. Many people numb themselves all the way to the grave, never admitting their despair. If you can hear your inner self crying out, then some part of you is alive and seeking change. As the saying goes, the truth will set you free, but first, it will make you miserable. That moment of clear emptiness, where even your favorite distractions fail to lift you, is the truth shining through. It's telling you that you can't go on as before, and that realization, as hard as it is, can liberate you to find a new path. Choosing your own way. True motivation, the kind that sustains a fulfilling life, is often quiet. It doesn't usually explode onto the scene in a burst of frenzy. Instead, it grows steadily when you align your life with your non-negotiable values and truths. After giving yourself space to reflect, you may start to sense certain convictions solidifying, things you must change, or boundaries you must set, or passions you can't ignore any longer. Acting on these realizations is the next crucial step. Start with small, concrete changes. It could be as simple as decluttering the noise, uninstalling a toxic app, carving out 30 minutes in the morning for writing your thoughts instead of consuming others' thoughts, or finally saying no to a commitment that drains you. "This no longer serves me" is a powerful statement you can tell yourself and others if needed. By removing what doesn't matter, you create room for what does. As you do this, you may notice a new spark of energy. When your actions start aligning with your authentic desires and values, motivation begins to return naturally. You'll find yourself wanting to do things rather than feeling you have to. You begin to act not out of social expectation or fear of missing out, but out of a genuine drive to express who you are. This is intrinsic motivation, and it's much more powerful and resilient than the external kind. Remember Frankl's enduring lesson: everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. You have this freedom right now, no matter your situation. You can't control all the stimuli and pressures of modern life, but you can control your response. You can reclaim that space between stimulus and response. By exercising this freedom, even in small ways, you begin to author your life's narrative rather than just consuming the narratives pushed at you. Demotivation as an invitation to a new life. If there is one message to take away, it is this: your demotivation is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of a new one. Feeling lost and drained can be the precursor to finding yourself and renewing your life with purpose. Much like physical pain prompts us to change a harmful posture, psychic pain prompts us to change a harmful lifestyle or mindset. Heed that call. This journey doesn't require heroics or drastic transformations overnight. It starts with humility and honesty, admitting what isn't working and daring to ask what a more meaningful life would look like for you. It continues with baby steps, consistent practices of reflection, small purposeful actions, gentle but firm boundaries around your attention and time. Over weeks and months, these small steps compound. You might suddenly realize one day that you feel more energetic, that you care about things again, that you're working toward a goal that excites and scares you in a good way. That is the quiet revolution of reclaiming meaning. Frankl emerged from humanity's darkest abyss with a profound truth. Even when stripped of every freedom, we still have the freedom to choose our attitude and our way forward. Compared to a concentration camp, the challenges we face in everyday life are manageable if we harness that inner freedom. We can choose to break the cycle of superficial stimulation and seek depth instead. We can choose to define success for ourselves rather than by what we see online. We can choose to endure the short-term discomfort of silence or effort for the sake of long-term growth and fulfillment. In doing so, we begin to write a narrative where we are not mere spectators or consumers, but protagonists with agency. We become people who are guided by purpose rather than buffeted by impulses. The world around us might remain noisy and chaotic, but our relationship to it changes. We no longer feel as helplessly swept up in the currents. We know what we stand for and where we're headed, even if slowly. In conclusion, the lack of motivation you feel today is not an incurable malady. It is a signal, a soulful invitation to step off the treadmill of excessive stimulation and reconnect with what makes you truly alive. By embracing moments of pause, listening to your inner voice, and orienting your life toward meaning, you can transform that apathy into passion and that exhaustion into energy. The path will not always be easy, but it will be real. And as you reclaim the space between stimulus and response, you reclaim your freedom to live a life that is authentically yours, a life in which motivation flows naturally from meaning, every day a quiet yet profound answer to the question life asks of you. What will you do with this irreplaceable existence? If these words stirred something within you, if you felt even a faint spark of recognition, then consider this your moment to act. Not tomorrow, not when life feels easier. Now take a breath. Ask yourself, what will I no longer tolerate? What truth will I no longer ignore? And then begin, no matter how small the first step may seem. Here on Neuromystique, we explore the depths of the human mind, the philosophies that withstand time, and the inner tools to build a life that is both resilient and deeply meaningful. If this journey resonates with you, then join us. Be part of this growing community of seekers. Click subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and keep walking this path with us. Because the work of understanding yourself and reclaiming your life doesn't end here. It's only beginning. The next video is waiting for you, and perhaps it holds the next piece of the puzzle you've been searching for all along.